Well, I'd like to extend a greeting to everyone listening today. I'm here with Donna, Augustine. My name is Aaron Sove. I'm Skapios or Ashkebewis with Anishinaabe House. And we're here today in beautiful territories of Ganyangahaga people by the Grand River. Here today to hear some good words, to receive some spiritual nourishments with our guest speaker today.
Ni gattugossisi miktishebi teluisi, ni Migama Wisk. My spirit name is Thunderbird Turtle Woman. I'm Migama, and from the northeast coast of Turtle Island, North America, where the sun first rises. I'm from El Sabuktuk First Nation. It used to be called Bicove, and so today I was invited as a storyteller, but the stories that I share are more spiritual stories, rather than I'm not a storyteller per se, but I do share spiritual stories, ones that have deep meaning. I conduct ceremonies. Many ceremonies of many different kinds, and I guess I'm a culture educator. I speak about our culture wherever I go, and I've traveled many places throughout Canada, throughout the United States, different parts of the world, sharing our culture, inspiring others, going to schools to inspire children and to help them, instill in them that sense of pride and belonging of who they are as First Nations. And it's not just First Nations students that I speak to. Anybody that I come across when I'm asked to speak, I do my best to instill in them that sense of who they are and that sense of sacredness. And so, like I said, I do a lot of ceremonies. I've been involved. I work on repatriation, the protection of ancestors, the repatriation of ancestors from burial sites, from museums and universities that have been taken out of the ground. And I've been doing that work since 1977, when the ancestors woke me up in the middle of the night and called to me. So the name that I carry, Thunderbird Turtle Woman, that name Mikjish, that turtle, that in 1977 I was pregnant with my second son, Bibulgus. I have 7 children, by the way. One's in the spirit world now, and I have 23 grandchildren. And so when that spirit woke me up in the middle of the night and he requested my help, and then he would come and with certain requests. He wanted to be, they needed help. They were in a museum and they wanted to be put back into the earth. So I have specific instructions, what I had to do before that, what ceremony to do. He taught me how to approach a burial site. I had no idea that he was preparing me for what I do, my purpose in life. So I work on repatriation. On the American side, I work under a law called NAGPRA law, Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act law, that was established in 1990. I'm an official designated under that law, and then now I work on international repatriation as well. I just did a reburial of ancestors last weekend, and next weekend I'm doing another reburial in the state of Maine. But I do this on this side as well. And so I don't get paid to do that work. My payment comes when those ancestors that have been on shelves in museums, sometimes over 100 years, collecting dust, and those ancestors are put back into the ground, back into Mother Earth. Once that first bit of earth touches them, their spirits are set free. And so this is my payment. This is part of my purpose that I came here to do, but also to bring back the ceremonies. I know that, as human beings, we're in a spirit world before we came here, and we all have a purpose. So one of my purposes was to help bring these ways back to our people. There are many injustices, and to bring back our ceremonies, and that's what I still do. I also to correct that injustice of ancestors being taken from us and being held hostage. this is what I do. So I'm part of many different boards and across the land. But ceremony for me is healing. This sacred fire, I just recently lost my son. Winchi's his name, Little Bear. And I'm sitting near a Little Bear right here. And it's so difficult, but what is healing for me is the sacred fire, these ceremonies that are being held here. This is what's healing for me. So I'm very happy today to be sharing some of my, what I've learned along the way. Not everybody knows everything. We all have knowledge that we've gained along the way. But we bring that together. We work collectively, because that's our way as Indigenous people, is not just individual, not just think about you, but to think more collectively. Everything is consensus. So when we bring our gifts and our strengths together, we form like something so beautiful. This is, when you think about that weaving, my dad was a weaver. And I remember my role was to choose the colors. And so he would weave that beautiful cloth together, just like the mind spiritual leaders, the mind people, they still weave that beautiful cloth. And so when we do that together as human beings, we bring our strength together, we form this beautiful tapestry that is so needed in this world right now. So I'm just very honored to be here today, to be a part of this. It's really good for my spirit, Olalio. That means thank you to all of you in Mi'kmaq. Thank you. Look, tabagian. No, to start with, kamiskishna e. Of Chimijipchewi. Tandujola sig of Kisuk. Tandelgamusig Mijipchewi. This song that I'm going to sing is a song that was hidden from our people for many years. This song was handed down from grandmother to granddaughter. And there was a time, because I'm from the east, where the sun first rises, a Mi'kmaq, that there was a bounty on our heads if we were caught practicing our ways. So our ancestors had to hide many of those songs. And as a result, many were forgotten. But slowly they started to come back through people fasting and when our ways started to come back to us. So this song was brought back by the late Sarah Denny, Mi'kmaq woman from Eskasoni, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. And it gives thanks for our food. And when we give thanks for our food, we're told we must always give thanks for our food, and that if we share our food, we'll always have food. And so here, I see food offering plates in front of me, in front of the sacred fire. So I'm going to give thanks for that food, offer tobacco to the drum. And the first 4 beats on the drum are for our ancestors, the ones that went before us, Sawit Kamiskishnaik.
Guanalia,
Nations. Aho. Ni gatto sisi mikti jebi teluisi. Ni miga mewisk. Utchubnug mikti juega di lewi. I just told you my Mi'kmaq language that my spirit name is Thunderbird Turtle Woman. And I'm Mi'kmaq from the northeast coast of North America, what the indigenous people of this land refer to as Turtle Island. So I'm sitting here today in front of this sacred fire, spirit dishes offered to the ancestors. And I offered my tobacco into the fire, the one that was gifted to me to be able to speak today. When that tobacco is offered, it's an offering for the spirits. And so, my English name is Donna Augustine. And there's a lot that Donna doesn't know. But our spirits, they have no limitations. And so it is them that guide us. And so today, sitting here, I take this very seriously because I know that many people are going to be listening to this. And so in front of that fire, and the series is about storytelling, my way of telling stories, I guess, or storytelling, is a bit different. First of all, Native storytelling is totally different than European storytelling, where once upon a time, and usually, and then at the end, and so forth. Our people, our ancestors, have always shared stories. First of all, our culture is not a written culture, our history. It's an oral-based tradition, and it's handed down generation to generation through storytelling, writings on the rocks, such as pictographs, petroglyphs, and prophecies. And so, through prophecy, our people, many tribes, many First Nations knew, the indigenous people of this land, Turtle Island, knew that many were going to arrive on our shores, many different types of people. And the first ones that were going to arrive, the light-skinned people. We knew this through prophecy. And one of the first things that our ancestors did, they stood at the shorelines, and as they arrived, our neighbors from across the great waters, our people knew that they had to help them, because the ones that did arrive, they were very ill. They didn't have any fresh food or fresh water for days. And so many didn't even make that long voyage. So the ones that arrived, the first thing that our people did in the East was to offer medicinal tea. It's still that way today, all the way across the board. Our form of welcome as the first people of this land is to offer, offer tea, and now coffee. But back then, they had medicinal tea, which was so needed. White pine needle tea, cedar tea, and all the different medicines that they offered to the people that arrived. They already knew they were going to arrive. And they nursed them back to health. Then they shared their medicines. It's still that way. Just a few minutes ago, I sang a feast song. And we're told, again, that if we always give thanks for our food, we share our food, we will always have food. And so they shared their food. Our ancestors shared the food with the newcomers. And I'm sure many other tribes across the land did the same thing, because the ones that arrived, they didn't know this land. They didn't know how to survive the harsh winters. They didn't know how to tan a moose, where the moose hunting was best, where the fishing was best at certain times. Our people had an intricate knowledge of the land. Still to this day, land itself is very important to us. We are people of the land, and we called the earth our mother, because Mother Earth sustains us, gives us everything that we need to survive. Water, which is so sacred, that's why I think I wore blue today. Water, blue to me represents water. And the Navajo people, wearing turquoise jewelry, they call that sky stone. And they say if you wear it next to your skin, it makes your spirit strong. So water is so important. Water is life. Then we have the fish and the animals and the plants, all those things that give up their lives for us to live. So we must always be in gratitude and give thanks for creation itself. Our people take stewardship and custodianship of this land very seriously. We have to take care of this land because we have to think, we are told when important decisions are to be made, you're to think 7 generations down the line, not just how it's going to affect our children now, but 7 generations from now, so our grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, great-great-great, and so forth. And how will Mother Earth look like 7 generations from now? So we need to take this, we need to take care of our earth, of our Mother, the Earth. And so, sitting here in front of the fire and thinking about storytelling, our ancestors, like I said, storytelling was so important to them, but our stories were more about survival and teachings. For example, how when they're sitting around in the winter, in the summer, everybody's busy, springtime, summer, fall. But in the winter, in those long, cold nights, they'd be sitting around, the fire, and they'd be sharing stories of survival. For example, maybe 2 brothers, father and his brother, they fell through the ice in the winter when they were ice fishing, and how they survived through that, what they had to do. Or maybe they got lost in the woods. These are the stories that they shared so that the ones that were listening, the children and the grandchildren, they would remember these stories so that when they got older, they would say, okay, what would my dad have done? What would my grandfather have done? What would my mother have done? And so they think back to these stories, and then they find themselves in the same situation, and they think back. And not only would they think back to how they would say, our people have a firm belief in the afterlife. That we believe and we know that the spirits of our ancestors watch over us. Every ceremony is proof of that. When we offer that tobacco to the sacred fire, that tobacco has a spirit. And that tobacco, when placed into that sacred fire, it represents, when that smoke goes up, it represents our connection from this world, the physical world, to the spirit world. The ones that went before us, we can't give them gifts, like physical gifts, but we can smudge, we can offer tobacco, smoke that goes up, and then we make spirit dishes for them to remember them. And those, so symbolically, they take that food with them. So the ones that went before us are always very, very important to us. We remember our ancestors. We must never forget our lineage. So we know that 7 generations before, our ancestors prayed for us to survive, to be here. Through prophecy, they knew that before contact, that there was going to be an assault on our ceremonies and our sacred objects. So many of our people were instructed. They had to take some of these sacred objects and teachings inland to be protected until it was time, until it was safe. And so that's what they did. Some of our people, the Mi'kmaq people, went inland, and some stayed to guard that eastern door and to keep that sacred fire going. And the ones that went inland, they protected those ways. And we are told that they were there was a route they were going to follow, and they were going to stop 7 times along the way. The last stop, they were going to, and imagine back then, there were no cars, there were no planes. They had to go through the wilderness, they had to have canoes, they had to portage. So it took them probably years to get to where they're meant to go. And when they arrived there, they were told that they were going to see food growing on the water. Well, in the east, we're by the ocean and the rivers. There's no food that grows by the water there, salt water. But when they arrived where the Ojibwe people live, they found wild rice growing on the water. And so they knew, they settled there. So we see Ojibwe's people, the Anishinaabe people, as our brothers and sisters. when I'm 70 years old. I have 7 children, my most sacred gift from the Creator. One is in the spirit world now. I have 23 grandchildren, 2 are in the spirit world, and I have many others that I've taken on as my grandchildren. But when I was 22 years old, I was invited to an education conference in Manitoulin, Ontario. So I went there, and I knew it was going to be more than an education conference, because I had a dream. And I told the Mohawk elder beside me, the late Ernie Benedict, there's a man on the last day. He's going around shaking people's hand. I told him, see that man? He's going to invite me to something. I knew it. I felt like, because I dreamt about it. So when that man was shaking people's hand and giving thanks, when he came up to me and he introduced himself to me, I told him, I know your name. He said, how did you know my name? I said, I dreamt about you last night. He looked at me for a moment, and he put his head down. He said, I'd like to invite you to a ceremony that we're having here tomorrow night. And so Ernie Benedict looked at me. Everybody else went back on their vehicles. They had got on with the professors and so forth. And we stayed. We went back on the bus a couple of days later after the ceremony. And so I attended. That was my first ceremony. And I want to go back to when I was growing up. When I was growing up, it used to be called Big Cove. Now it's called Elsipogtog First Nation. And we were first contact. So we experienced assimilation and colonization before anyone else across our brothers and sisters out west. So there was a time, there was a bounty on our heads, our ancestors, if they were caught practicing their ways. They couldn't do a ceremony, they couldn't have drums, they couldn't hold eagle feathers, and it had to be hidden. It had to go underground. We had to fast to get those ways back. We had to pray. But here I am. So when I was growing up as a little girl, there was no evidence of our culture in all the Maritimes, parts of Maine, parts of Quebec. There were no powwows. Nobody had sweat lodges. It was all hidden, and it had to be. We still spoke our language. I remember everybody in my community at the time spoke our language fluently. We had our strong sense of family, strong sense of community. We still are really excellent fishermen, excellent hunters, but the part that was missing was the spiritual component, the ceremonial component. But I remember telling my dad, so before I went to school, I couldn't even speak English. There was no kindergarten back then. So I went to school at the age of 6. So before that, nobody in my community had a television set. There was a couple of people had radios. I remember we had this little radio. My dad put it on a shelf so us kids wouldn't break it. And I remember telling my dad with strong conviction, so I must have been only 4 or 5 years old, and I looked at him and I said, I know that somewhere there's people like us that still pray in the old way, somewhere. My spirit knew it. I knew it. There was no evidence. I didn't see other tribes, I didn't see, but I knew. As a little girl, 4 or 5 years old, imagine that. Spirit was already speaking through me. So here I am, 22 years old, got invited to the ceremony. I dreamt about it. And when the smudge started, and they started to pray, there were 7 pipes in that room that night, and one was on loan from a museum in Ottawa. And they started to sing, and they started to drum and pray. My tears just flowed. Here it was, what I knew since I was a little girl, what I told my dad. And my dad had gone to residential school, forced into a residential school when his parents had died. Him and his 2 brothers. He was 6 years old. His older brother was 8. His younger brother was 4. So to hear his daughter say something like that to him, can you imagine what he thought about? But he always knew that I had that gift of dreaming, because to us, that's one thing they could not take away, is our gift of dreaming. There's always ways around, An example is, I was told that in South America, when when the Christianity came in, and they were told, no, they can't go pray. They can't make offerings to the mountains anymore. And what they did, they found a way to do this. So they took a statue of the Virgin Mary, whatever, and they put flowers all around that, and they carried this up to the mountain. And so they thought, okay, they're honoring this Christian statue. But on there were their flowers and, the medicines that they give to the mountain. And so where I come from, we're not allowed to have a sacred fire. When somebody passes on, we light that sacred fire. And that sacred fire burns for 4 days and 4 nights. That spirit that has left this world is now on a journey and going around visiting their loved ones, places they've been before, visiting. And that sacred fire is lit so that they'll find their way home. Well, that too was taken away from us. But what happened, our people found a way. When I was young, they would light those lamps. Nobody had electricity for a long time. We would light those lamps and keep those lamps burning. And then later on, the light bulbs outside. So now, still to this day, you go to Mi'kmaq territory, they'll leave the outdoor light on for 9 days, lights. But we now have reclaimed who we are. We have reclaimed our heritage. We have taken back what the Creator gave to us. So our sacred fire is back. So when I was at this ceremony, getting back to Manitoulin Island, I cried and cried. Every time the lights would go out, because it was 4 rounds, it was held in the basement of a school, my tears would just flow, just like somebody poured water. And I remember, and the lights would come on in between. And the conductors didn't see me. I'm sitting way back here, near this elder woman. And at that time, I didn't even know, it'd be good to wear a skirt at a ceremony. I didn't know anything because we weren't taught. I was very fortunate. My grandfather taught me about medicines, and I was wondering why he was so scared and why it's like he had to hide it when he taught me about medicines. So here I am at a ceremony for the first time. I didn't know anything about smudging, nothing. And sitting near this elder grandmother, and a lot of people in the room. And every time the lights would go off, the prayers would start, my tears would just flow. And on the 4th round, same thing. My tears started again. And all of a sudden, the conductor, I didn't even see him. He didn't see me because there were posts in between. He was found out later, late Eddie Benton Benet, the Medewan, part of the Medewan. And he said to us, we're very fortunate tonight, he said, because a spirit has entered into our ceremonies. And he said, this spirit is telling me there's a young woman in here and she's crying. He said, and I could hear his voice, he said, the spirit is telling me, tell this young woman not to cry. Everything's going to be all right. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, it's like almost like I could feel somebody in front of me, but around me, hard to explain. And then I felt this most gentlest hug I have ever felt in my entire life. I have never felt it again. It'd be just like you took down eagle feathers, and just, it was the most, loving hug I have ever received. And I knew it wasn't a human being. And all of a sudden, just like that, out of the blue, I thought of my brother, my baby brother. He had passed away when I was 6 years old. He had an enlarged heart, and back then our hospital was just a small little hospital. They couldn't save him. And my mom was so devastated she couldn't even look at him. And we would go to his gravesite, but I wouldn't always think about him. And all of a sudden, he was right there. And I knew his spirit came to tell me that not only is he watching over me, but he's watching over my entire family. And he wanted me to know that. It was so amazing, so amazing. And then I said, Ula Edek, here it is. Here it is what they took away from our people. Here it is what I told my dad. And I just was so emotional. And then after that, after the ceremony, I said, I'm going to find out who I am as a Mi'kmaq woman. And I'm going to bring this back to my people. And that's exactly what I've done since I was 22 years old. I came back, I was one of the icebreakers, and it wasn't easy. People would, there was a handful. My dad and I at first, just him and I, and then a few others, and then it got bigger. But they would make fun of them for lighting sweetgrass, stuff like that. And I was very fortunate because nobody ever made fun of me to my face. I think it's because they couldn't look in my eyes. Still to this day, I just know that they see truth in my eyes. They see spirit in my eyes. and I have very strong convictions. I work with the ancestors. I bring ancestors back from museums that have that have been taken out of the ground, studied, scraped, boiled. They call them specimens in labs. And then they put them on a shelf in a museum, like hostages. And our people have to beg to get them back. This is what I do, and I do reburial of the ancestors. And so they're still in our blood. We carry our old ones, those most ancient ones, the real medicine people, in our veins, in our bloodline. And with that comes that genetic memory. The things that they saw, the things that they witnessed. They lived in total harmony with one another. They lived in harmony with the earth. They never took more than what they needed. They shared all those values that they carried. And now, it's not a religion per se, it's a way of life. So when we go back to that way of life, we're in essence going back to those values that our ancestors carried. So I knew I had a big job to do. I knew, but I started, and no matter how difficult it was, bringing the ceremonies back to my people. And it started with just a few, and it grew and grew and grew and grew. Now, everywhere you go, every Native community in the East, we're the people of the dawn. Part of the Wabanaki, the people of the dawn. Everywhere you go, there's ceremonies. Our powwows are back. Our children are celebrating who they are. We need to. We need to do this before our language is forgotten forever. We need to revive. We need to believe that the Creator placed us here on Turtle Island. He didn't place us in China. He didn't place us in Europe. He placed us here. So everywhere we walk here on Turtle Island are the remains of our ancestors, the ashes of our ancestors. And so we know that spiritually our ancestors watch over us. We just have to remember that. We make offerings for them. We honor them. When we do those pipe ceremonies, that pipe, we never put a pipe together unless in ceremony. We're giving gratitude or we're asking for something in a humble way. That pipe, one part represents the physical world. The other part represents the spirit world. So when you put them together, it is now a spirit, and you're holding a spirit in your hand. You have to earn that right to carry that pipe. You can't just go watch a couple of ceremonies, all of a sudden you're going to do ceremonies, You have to earn these ways, and you have to work on yourself. And in our way, the elders are honored. They're the wisdom keepers. They carry that knowledge. And even here today, there's so many things I could talk about. I've traveled all across the United States, Canada. I work on American side. I work under a law, NAGPRA law, Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act law since 1990. I work on international repatriation. There's a lot of things I could talk about. I've been with spiritual leaders all over the world. I've done ceremonies with Dalai Lama. I've done ceremonies with Black spiritual leaders, Africa, Sami, But for me, the teachings are so simple. And two things, if I could sum up everything that I've learned everywhere I've gone in two teachings, it would be, first of all, be kind to yourself. Secondly, be kind to others. It is so simple. And I do, so I go to schools and wherever I'm invited. And when I go, I know there's a responsibility inside of me. And even now, the ones of you that are going to be listening to this broadcast, the ones in this room, there's a responsibility. I might only have that little bit of time with you. So it is so important to me that it's not useless words. I don't want to waste my words. I want it to be something that has value for you. And so the most important thing is to value yourself. As Indigenous people, the circle is very important to us, the drum, sacred fire. Our ceremonies are all in a circle. Because when we sit in a circle, it represents that each and every person within that circle has value. Each and every person has worth. As opposed to what they've told us for years, even when I was growing up. You're not good enough. I went to day school, and the same thing. They looked down upon us. We would go into town. We could see it, even as children, the way they would look at us. But somewhere inside of me, I've never been ashamed to be Native. I've always been proud of my culture. Even before I knew what to be proud of, what words I could use, there's something inside of me that knew and was always so grateful that the Creator made me who I am. It doesn't make us better than any other race. Every race, everybody should be proud of their heritage, whatever that is. And I tell people, if you have mixed blood, be proud of all the parts that make up you. But you came to this earth at this time in your body right now. And so when we sit in a circle, I remind people that every single one of us came here with a purpose. No one is any better. No one is any less. You could be sitting next to a billionaire. Doesn't make that billionaire any better than you. The most learned person, it doesn't make them any better or any lower than you. We're all equal in the eyes of the Creator. And we all have something to offer. We're all unique. We're all special. And my dad would say, find out what your purpose is. Then become the best that you can be. We don't need to copy anyone. For example, he would say, just like the trout that might want to become the big, beautiful salmon, he can never be because the Creator made him a trout, but become the best that you can be. We all have limitations. I can't draw for beans. I can't, a lot of things I can't do. I'm not really good at computers. Some young people just go on there like nothing. But my strength, I think, is speaking, I sing, and I pay attention to Spirit. I really pay attention. I pay attention to my dreams. I allow my Spirit to guide me. And if you listen to that intuition, we all have that. It's a gift. It's a gift that we carry. We're born with it, and we have it until the day we leave this world, from our first breath to our last breath. We all have a guiding Spirit. And sometimes you feel something, I shouldn't do that. And you do it anyway. Well, you're going to find out later why you shouldn't have done that. It's your Spirit trying to protect you. We all have that. We were all in the spirit world, every single one of us. And we believe that we're going to be back in the spirit world with our loved ones on the other side. We're just here on this earth for a short time. And that's why I say everybody has something to offer. I tell people, the most sacred gift that the Creator has ever given me, as Donna, as a mother, is the gift of my children. There's no greater gift than the gift of a child. Somebody could put 10 Cadillacs outside or billions of dollars. It doesn't matter. And so when I go to the schools, I'm aware of this because I know that those children might not hear this enough. Just this morning, I talked to my sister. She had to kind of scold her daughter or something. Her daughter's older, and I told her, okay, and just remember, if you have to reprimand or scold someone, don't leave them walking away all brokenhearted and just thinking about what they did wrong. Fill them as well. Before they walk away, tell them some of the things they did right. You have to, for that balance, the eagle. When an eagle flies, the eagle reminds us to fly in balance. When an eagle soars in a circle, it reminds us as people to sit in a circle. That balance between work and play, the balance between the serious side of life and laughter. We're always serious, never laughing. We're going to get off balance. If we're always laughing, never getting serious, we're going to get off balance. So that's how it is, too, in that giving and receiving that circle. So if you have to reprimand someone, for example, I've been to South Dakota, I used to live there. I've traveled all over. And there's a person, the elder, and that elder keeps an eye on the drums and makes sure that nobody is drinking at those drums. He makes sure that if they're singing a traditional song, it stays traditional. Like a powwow song, you can change it, you can add it, you can make a powwow song. But a traditional song, it has to last generation to generation unchanged. There's an elder that is designated at each place to make sure of that. So, there was a drum. It was left. Nobody was there to tend the drum. Well, guess what? The elder went and tipped the drum. He got up to the microphone, and he said why he had to tip the drum. And, we have to take care of the drum because it represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth, the heart of our mother. And on that drum, when the men sit around the big drum, they're honoring the woman, the spirit woman. And they're always reminded that it was a woman that brought the original sacred pipe. So the elder said many things, and then, in his language as well. And then, but, knowing the balance, he says to them, but the last 3 traditional songs that you sung, because this was a traditional powwow, You did it. They were really good. You did it the right way. They were excellent. So instead of this drama group walking away, being reprimanded in front of everybody, feeling like, oh my goodness, they walked away to that balance. Yes, you're going to learn a lesson, but at the same time, you're being valued. So we should always do that in life. Never scold anybody take something away without putting something positive back. So when I sit with the children in a circle, or anybody really, and I remind them how sacred each and every one of them are, that we were born into this world sacred, the Creator, when we were born sacred, and that no matter what happens in life, you are still sacred. And that if you know you're sacred, you're not going to go bully someone. If you know how sacred you are, you're not going to let people bully you. You'll know, But I always tell them, too, that we don't need, I share the teaching of the eagle. When you look at that eagle, and sometimes you see those crows, they're pestering that eagle. They're pestering him. Well, that eagle has really sharp claws, sharp talons. And that eagle could turn around, and that'll be it for the crow. Goodbye, crow. But in the wisdom of the eagle knows that those crows can only fly so high. So the eagle starts to soar higher and higher and higher and higher, away from those crows, pestering crows. So that's how it is in life. I tell people, if somebody's bugging you, they're bothering you, even yelling at you, whatever, you don't need to respond back, Just see yourself like the eagle and soar higher and higher and higher and higher. More peace will happen that way. There are so many teachings in our ways. They're so simple. They're so simple that I've seen learned scholars that think of it as nonsense because they're too simple. With them, all their answers and scientific knowledge has to be complicated. No, it's not complicated at all. A lot of it is just common sense. Treat your fellow man the way you want to be treated. And so here in North America, Turtle Island, there's been a lot of injustices, as you know, residential schools. Some people, just a few years ago, 10 years ago, they've never even heard of residential schools. They didn't know about the missing and murdered Indigenous women. They didn't know about 60s Scoop, all those things. They didn't know. And I want to tell you that the true history of our people has not been taught in schools. A lot of people my age, and they still remember those old John Wayne movies where they depict our people in such a negative manner, And we're not that way at all. We have a lot to offer to this world. We have a connection to this earth. Just allow us to be who we are. Don't try to change us. We're perfect just the way we are, just like people, I tell them. And now our people have adopted a lot of ways, and some ways are good and some ways are not so good. But I always tell them, okay, come back to the fire. Come back to that sacred fire. Come back to the center. Come back to remembering who you are. When you go to university, our students, I know they're going to get lonely. I told this to my own daughter. Remember who you are, your identity. Every paper that you write, use that somewhere in there. And write about how you feel a little bit in your papers, because nobody can't grade you on how you feel. That's your personal feelings. So when you come at it, knowing who you are, it's going to help you all throughout life in every single thing that you do, because you know what? As much as they tried to have us walk around like this with our heads held down, and I've seen it growing up, we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to walk with our head held down. We don't need to place ourselves above anybody, but we need to know that the Creator gave us beautiful teachings. The Creator gave us that sacred fire. The Creator gave us that sacred pipe. The Creator gave us our beautiful language that can't be interpreted into English. They've tried to write it in ways, but and even the schools, I tell them, don't worry about how to write it. Some people try to write it this way or that way. Let's just speak it. Because when I was growing up, in my community, everybody just spoke it. We didn't write it. But just because our languages are so beautiful, they're so descriptive, they're so loving. In an example, by the way, we teach best by example and we learn best by example. So an example of that in our language, I'm a fluent speaker, by the way. When you say, gelusin means to speak. Gelusin means you are good. So our languages, my language teaches me that when I speak to someone, I'm to speak good words. Language teaches me that. And there's a lot of beauty in our language. And so in the East, we had to struggle to get our songs back. There were very few. That feast song that I sang a while ago, it's like a song of resilience. Because, this elder, she learned it as a little girl from her grandmother. She had to carry that inside of her for years. Her grandmother told her, don't sing that song until you feel safe. So even though our ways had come back, the powwows had come back, some of them, it still wasn't time. And then I remember that time that she brought it out. And I could feel it inside of me. I knew that this song was about, we're still here. We are still here. I tell people when I think about residential schools, they can cut our hair, they can punish us for speaking our language, but they can never kill a spirit. We're still here. They can't kill the dreams. Those are dreams from the Creator. It's just like if you are a designer or you design like skirts or something, designs. People can copy your designs, but I tell them, I know one woman, she had a near-death experience. She's a Navajo woman. And she became my friend. I put her on a fast. And she said on the other side, she saw these symbols. So when she came back, she would make things for people. And she put those symbols on there. And then people started copying them, And I told, don't worry, because they can copy those. But what you have, what the Creator gave you, that gift to come back to this earth with, is endless, limitless. Because even she doesn't know what designs will come next. But all these designs, she saw them when she had that near-death experience. And so, like I said, sitting here, I'm trying to share some of the things that are important because we don't know what's going to happen in this world. We don't know. We're kind of living scary times. COVID just happened, and now, there's world leaders fighting. There's talk about nuclear. That's pretty scary, when we think about the next generations. But I want to remind you of something that the late Albert Lightning, Buffalo Child, shared with me. He was one of my most influential teachers. I had the good fortune of learning from 4 medicine people in my life, 4 medicine men and 1 medicine woman. And he was the most influential teacher. And incredible things happened around him that can't be explained. And he would tell us, we, as the first people of this land, are still spiritually protected by the Creator. And I'll say that again. We, as the first people of this land, are still spiritually protected by the Creator. So I know if something major is going to happen, we'll dream about it, we'll know. We'll be guided. Every community has had dreamers, and they still have dreamers. And they know things before they happen. It's a gift that no one can take away. I remember this one time, this Mohawk elder, he called us the magical ones. I said, why do you call us the magical ones? The Mi'kmaq people. He said, because, you guys had gifts that we can't explain. He said, we'd be coming down the river trying to surprise attack the Mi'kmaq people. He said, they would always know. We could never surprise attack them. And he said at one point they'd be on this side of the river, then they're on the other side of the river. But we don't take those for granted. Those are sacred gifts from the Creator, and we don't take those dreams for granted. I've been a dreamer since I was a child. And every community, still to this day, has those dreamers. So a long time ago, the dreamers, the people that would feel things before they happen, they were really protected. Just like the Navajo code talkers, because they protected Navajo code talkers because they're a protection for a whole battalion or whatever during the time of war. So this is, they're still dreamers in our community. And they, like I said, and so if anything's going to happen, they would know. Another thing that the late Albert Lightning told us was, if anything's going to happen, he said, our protection, the sacred fire. Go to the sacred fire. Go to the teepee. Even if it's just a tripod, and even if the sacred fire is out, just the fact that there was a sacred fire there, it's still a sacred fire. Go into the sweat lodge, that's protected. So these are things that we know, And I believe if we always truly honor the spirits of this land, they will not hurt us. I want to tell you, when our fishermen go to fish, I always tell them, before you go to fish, it's a very dangerous job, especially when they go crab fishing, where I come from. One of the most dangerous jobs in the world, as they say. Always offer tobacco to the spirit of the ocean before you go out. Give thanks for that fish and just to honor everything that's in that ocean. Because if you honor the spirit of the ocean will not hurt you. So that is coming back. Our hunters, before they go to hunt, they're to offer tobacco to give thanks to the spirit of the animal that's given up their life for us to live. So life is about gratitude. I think life is about just knowing who you are, finding out who you are, what you're good at, what your purpose is. And so for myself, I think a part of my responsibility, not just in ceremony, I do this in sweat lodge ceremonies and every ceremony, I try to instill in everyone their own strength, their own gifts. I want them to see their own gift, their own spirit, and how beautiful that is. Because when we sit in that circle, we never place ourselves above anybody. When we sit in a sweat lodge, I always tell people, we're doing this together. I might be sitting here at the driver's seat right now, but we're doing this together. Everyone in here has a role to play, every single one of you. So I'm very thankful for the gifts that the Creator has brought back to us. He brought us back the drum. He brought the pipe. He brought the eagle feathers, the tobacco, the 4 sacred medicines, sweetgrass, sage, and more importantly, he reminded us of who we were. When those children died in the residential schools, to know that they didn't die in vain, because someday they're going to be remembered. They're going to be honored across the land. They're in a spirit world now. And I remember this past Orange Shirt Day, we're singing and we're doing whatever. And I remember at my own community, I was invited to do the opening prayer at the school. And when I got up on stage and I looked out they were all sitting on the floor in that gym, the children in that school. They were all wearing orange. They all had their little Every Child Matters flags. They were cheering. When I got on that stage, they were cheering. And it's just one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen, because next to me, behind me, right here, was a woman that attended, my friend Marilyn, who had attended residential school. And I said, imagine what the children now, in the spirit world, when they see this, they're being honored. Imagine this woman beside me, my friend, who's being honored. They never ever thought, while they were in there, that this was going to happen. Those are horrible places. There were places of abuse of all kinds, physical, spiritual, and the worst abuse was telling them, I want to tell you, and this came to me. I was invited to go to Chapelo once, and because I protect burial sites, and there was a site, they were treaty land entitlement. They were trying to keep that land back from them. And they said, no, we think it's a sacred site because one of our workers 4 years ago and a couple of years ago found some artifacts. Well, who better to take care of that land than Indigenous people? But they were giving them a hard time. So I went there, and usually I would dream about the ancestors. But this time was different. And when I got there that night and I told them, was there a residential school here? I didn't know. And that woman said, yes, but it's not standing anymore, but the steeple is there, but I can take you there. So when I went there, and there it was, and I had to go pray. I'd want to go in depth into that dream, but I knew they wanted a food offering. They even showed me, I could see this fish, and it was half filleted. I could see it was almost like pink. And when we walked in that place to see that man, that woman calls me in, she's all excited. She said, look, because I told her about that fish. That man was standing there in his garage, filleting that fish just like what I saw. And I even said, oh, that's what they want for a food offering. And then I said, why would they ask for fish? I'm thinking, right, that white fish or whatever. And then I remembered, to them that represents home. So we went to the burial site, to where they're buried, and there were numbers. There were little aluminum things sticking out of the ground about this high, all kind of rusted, and numbers on there, not even names. And I felt so bad. We took food offerings there. We took ribbon, just like in my dream. And then I knew why the Creator had brought me there. I said, I have a message here. And I spoke to them. I spoke to them in my language. Because the worst thing they ever did was tell those children, and this came to me, that nobody wanted them, that even their own parents didn't want them. And I told those children, that's a lie. Your parents loved you. They had no choice when they took you away. They had no choice, not even knowing where you're going, if you're ever going to come back, and many didn't. And so this is where it comes from, deep down inside of me, that our people should never have to go through that again. No child of any race should ever be taken, ripped from their mother's arms and taken to a place like that. But we have a lot of work to do, because the indigenous people of this land, with the intergenerational trauma, this is where their parents learned to be. There's a lot of work to help them to see within themselves their own beauty, their own strength, and how sacred they truly are, brought here from the spirit world by the Creator to their parents, most sacred gift. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And I want to thank you, all of you, for listening to me today. It means a lot to me. Walalio. Masudnogama, all my relations, for we are all related. Aho.